My next guest is Honorable John Baird of Canada. The Honorable John Baird is the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Canada. He was first elected to the House of Commons in 2006. He re-elected in 2008 and 2011. In the past, he has served as leader of the government in the House of Commons and Minister of Environment, Minister of Transport, Infrastructure and Communities, and President of the Treasury Board. Oof, that's a lot of jobs.
I can't keep a job.
Yeah. Prior to entering federal politics, Mr. Baird was a member of Ontario's provincial legislature, where he represents the constituency of Nippon, Carleton from 1995 to 2005. That's correct? Okay. During that time, he served as Minister of Community and Social Services, Energy, Francophone Affairs, and we will talk about that, Children and Youth Services, and the Government House Leader. Hello, Mr. Baird.
Pleasure to be with you.
You know, as I told Mr. Chambers, we look at Canada in kind of a fascination, because we all the time use that countries criticize us and telling a lot of critics about us, and Canada has changed. Can you tell us how Canada became such a great supporter of the State of Israel?
Well, I think for Canada, it's all about values. When we approach our foreign policy, it's principally about two things. One, how do we promote Canadian interests? And two, how do we promote Canadian values? And Israel is the only liberal democracy in the region where freedom, the rule of law, human rights are all the cornerstones of a civil society. And we just don't go along to get along anymore. We don't join the continualist pylon and anti-Israel sentiment that far too often you see at the United Nations and other international organizations.
Do you feel that your country, you yourself, paying a price for being on our side?
We don't in Canada do this for popularity's sake.
Oh, come on, we're all politicians here. Except me, of course.
In my own constituency, we have 2,800 Jews and 11,500 Arabs and Muslims, so it's not a winning political formula. But I think when you do what's right, people respect you, and that's what you get into politics for, is to do the right thing.
But internationally, do you feel that other countries are hitting Canada because of being on Israel's side?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a popular conception in the media that somehow you'll be ostracized. I spoke at the United Nations against unilateral action by the Palestinian Authority last November, yet today some of my very best friends and colleagues as foreign ministers are in the Arab world. I think they may not agree with us and everything, but I think they respect the fact that we take real clear positions and that we stand up for what we believe in. You don't want to be popular, you want to be respected.
A little bit about your support. What does it mean? Does it mean that instead of being against, you are now pro-settlements? Or rather that you've come to a conclusion that settlements is not a problem for Middle East peace?
Well, we think unilateral actions on either sides are unhelpful. Whether it's the Palestinian Authority going to the UN seeking statehood rather than negotiating it with Israel. Settlement expansions are unhelpful. But what we don't want to do is join on the bandwagon of piling on Israel day after day after day that we see at the United Nations. We think it's unhelpful. It doesn't advance the cause of peace. There's only one single way to achieve peace, and that's for both parties unconditionally to sit down at the table and to negotiate. And that's the vision that we promote.
Not long ago,
I was told this is going to be a tough crowd.
Yeah. Not long ago, you said that the Palestinians will pay a heavy price if they will decide to turn to the International Court in The Hague. What do you mean by that?
We think that will be tremendously unhelpful to the peace process. I think that it'll hurt themselves. If that's the action that they choose to take, and there's no indication that they're looking at doing it. I've had conversations with Palestinian leadership on this issue. We think we've got to stop, going to whether it's Geneva, The Hague, the UN in New York to achieve statehood. The only single way that a state will be born will be right here in the Middle East, right here dealing with between Jerusalem and Ramallah. And that's why it's our hope that both parties will constructively engage with John Kerry. John Kerry, on taking office, immediately has jumped on the most intractable problem in the world, And it's our hope that both the Palestinians and the Israeli leadership will take what is a tremendous opportunity for peace. And we're going to do everything we can to support John Kerry and President Obama in that.
Does it mean also to reestablish the committee that dealt with the refugees?
If John Kerry and President Obama think that would be helpful, if both sides think that would be helpful, we'd be prepared to consider that, you bet. I mean, we're prepared to do whatever we can do to support the process. We think it's important, we think it matters, and the long-term stability and peace and prosperity of Israel and the Palestinian people require it.
Not long ago, you've met Minister of Justice, Tzipi Livni, in her office, which is, by the way, responsible for the negotiation between Israelis and Palestinians. You met her at their office in East Jerusalem and were criticized for the location of the meeting. What was your response?
Yeah, listen, I'll meet any peace-loving person anywhere to discuss peace in the Middle East, anytime, anywhere, anyplace. And I do think we have to stop arguing over these symbolic minor points and get down to the substance of the issue, which is tackling the challenges which are on the table, which everyone knows what they are. And that's why I think we've got to approach John Kerry's initiative, the American-led initiative, with some hope, with some optimism, and we hope both sides will approach it with goodwill. I do think, Prime Minister Netanyahu, after he formed his new government, appointing Tzipi Livni, which I think is a huge olive branch to the Palestinian people, I think put his oar in the water, saying that he was hopeful and optimistic and was prepared to work with John Kerry, prepared to extend an arm to the Palestinian leadership, and we look forward to Secretary Kerry's return to the region in the coming days.
Yes. I want to ask you about Prime Minister Netanyahu. You've met him several times in Canada and also here. For some Israelis, it's still an enigma. Do you really think that he is really want to do it, that he is really committed to the idea of two-state solution, that he really want to proceed in that path? Or maybe he's just saying it because he knows that the Palestinian will never deliver?
Well, I'll answer the question. I'm going to make a preface first, but I want to give you a specific answer. Canada's support for Israel is not about any one political party or any one political leader. We have a great love for the state of Israel, the people of Israel, and we will be supportive of Israel regardless of the choice that Israelis make on who will govern them. I can tell you...
Yeah, this is a tough crowd.
I can tell you, I do believe profoundly and sincerely, having spent a lot of time one-on-one with Prime Minister Netanyahu, that he's sincere and genuine, and that he wants to seek a two-state solution. The one thing I've been incredibly impressed with whether it's President Perez, who I first heard speak in Canada some 15 years ago, whether it's each and every one of the four coalition leaders in this government, every single one of them, including President Perez, has said passionately and proactively they have no goal, no desire to govern and rule over the Palestinian people. And I genuinely believe that, and if that's the approach they bring to the table, I think it's a positive and constructive one.
Before we get to other part of the region, I want to ask you, in one of your past interviews, you said that after your current position as the Foreign Minister of Canada, you would like to be a kibbutznik. Can you explain that to us?
I think what I said was, in Canada, if you hold political office, you're not allowed to run for another political office. So the day that I announced my campaign for the federal parliament, I had to resign my seat in the Ontario legislature. And at the time, people thought it was kind of a foolish move, that our party wasn't going anywhere and that we had little chance to form a government. And someone asked me, what are you going to do if you lose the election? And I said, oh, maybe I'll go to Israel and work on a kibbutz.
Oh, okay. But you know it's over, you know, this communist thing, and...
I won the election, so it's...
Oh, okay. So you don't need to deal with that.
But, you know, in this business it's fickle, so you never know. If there's any kibbutzniks here, please let me know. Give me your card on the way out. There's one right there.
Yeah. We still have some of them, and they are great guys. Turning
and gals.
Yes. Turning now to Syria, the international community has failed to deal with this issue. The people of Syria, 400 kilometers from here, are massacring each other for the last 2 years. Do you think it's not a prolonged moral stain on the Western world?
There's no doubt that the crisis in Syria, the violence, the bloodshed, I mean, this This crisis in Syria has become, and its neighboring countries, has become the biggest humanitarian crisis of this century. I think it haunts all of us that we have not been able to find a path, a way out of this violence and the war that Assad has waged against his own people. We've spent many hours, many days, countless meetings on this challenge, and it's deeply, deeply troubling. As soon as one party starts to do better militarily, they're less likely to want to attend the peace talks. In my judgment, the only way to end the suffering of the Syrian people is a political solution. That a military one has been long and been drawn out and has not met with success. The more the Syrian opposition is armed, the greater the level of violence that Assad uses against his own people. And that's why the only game in town is really the Geneva process and a hopeful Geneva too.
But the rearmament, the armament of the both sides, you know, the Russians are arming Assad, the West, you know, Europe is arming the rebels.
Well, Europe has not announced they're arming the rebels. They've announced they have the ability to do so after July 1st. There's not a consensus.
But President Obama said that it will.
There's not a consensus in the United Kingdom to arm them, and France has not made a decision to. President Obama put a red line on the use of chemical weapons, and he's following through with, you know, providing AK-47s, smaller arms. We don't. You know, I'm not going to publicly criticize the administration. They put the red line in place, and I think that was important. What I believe is we can't allow any rogue regime to use these weapons of mass destruction, which have horrible, horrible consequences, to get away with it. And the president obviously has made his decision. I think the leadership of John Kerry in the Geneva II process is tremendously important, and I think the international community has got to do all we can to support it. Okay, a political solution is the only way to end the suffering of the Syrian people.
Okay, Iran now.
I go from the easy ones to the tough ones.
How do you perceive the election of Hassan Rouhani as the president of Iran? Do you see that as a chance or as a risk?
Well, you certainly couldn't get any worse than Ahmadinejad, in my judgment.
But you know, I will challenge you on that, because Ahmadinejad was foolish enough to say the truth, to deny the Holocaust and to say that Iran is willing to eliminate Israel. Now we have a better face. You know, Rouhani is like a moderate, but maybe we'll do the same. So maybe it's more dangerous path.
Fair enough. Having said that, we've got to be realistic. We've got to be honest with ourselves. There's only one person who's going to make a decision to change course on the nuclear program in Tehran, and that's the supreme leader. He is the number one. He is the one. He and his court will make those decisions, and it won't be the president. This was not by. I mean, I've been criticized for being a bit tough on Iran at times, which I wear as a badge of honor. But this is not in any way, shape, or form a fair election. When you automatically, first off, say 51% of the population, women, were not allowed to contest the presidency, when only 6 or 8 of some 250-odd candidates were even allowed to get their names on the ballot, it doesn't resemble anything like the democracy that we know and cherish here in Israel or in Canada or the West.
Finally, what in general, as our friend, does Israel needs to do differently in light of growing international criticism?
Do more trade and investment with Canada.
All right. We'll do that.
Thank you.
Baird, Prime Minister of Canada, thank you very much.